Hello. In this video, we're going to explore the basics of what are called constructors. Constructors are used to construct an object when it is initially made. There is actually already a constructor on this screen here, and that is this line right here. This is the call to the fraction constructor. And the first thing that's really important to know is that a constructor always has the exact same name as the class. So, what a constructor is it's like a method. Some people will call it a method, but for our purposes, we will always call it a constructor. And a constructor always has the same name as the class, and it's always called when you first construct the object. Now, if you go into the fraction class, you'll notice that there's no actual method with the name fraction. And I purposely use the term method there. That's because Java will make a default constructor if no constructor is written. And what that default constructor will do is set all the fields to their default values. So in Java, if you don't actually declare and initialize an integer to a value, it will automatically initialize it to 0. So if I comment out these two lines and run this file, we will get 0 over 0. And that's because it's calling what's called a default constructor. However, we want to be able to write our own constructors. And so the first thing to know is that constructors always have to be written directly under the fields, and that constructors have no return types. So constructors are always written under fields, and constructors have no return type. So when we make a constructor, we say public, then the name of the class, and just like any other method, we can indicate parameters. So inside here, I can now say num equals 0, denom equals 1. And so now if I go over here and run this, since I've specified my own constructor, Java will know to use the constructor that has been written. And so when I first make this, it's going to create a fraction. But what if I want my constructor to take some parameters? And in fact, I can do that. I can overload constructors. So I'm going to write a second constructor, and it still has to have the same name as the class, and I'm going to give it two parameters, an int n and an int d. And so now what I'm going to say is numerator is equal to n, denominator is equal to d. So this is a second constructor. And what we've done is we've overloaded constructors, meaning that we have multiple constructors with different parameters. And that's how the computer distinguishes between them. So here, f1 is obviously using the constructor that has no parameters. But if I create a fraction called f2, and then I pass it 8 and 9, the computer will know to use the second constructor that has two integers as parameters. And then if I take this line and let's copy this, and let's paste this below, and that's going to be f2, and that's going to be f2, and I run this now, what we see is that fraction f1 is created using a constructor with no parameter, so it sets it to whatever it is. And fraction f2 is constructed using the constructor that takes two parameters. And then that sets the numerator to the first parameter and the denominator to the second parameter. One comment I'd like to make about all these videos is that I'm not commenting very extensively. And the reason for that is so you're not sitting watching this video with me writing a large number of comments. The one thing I really want to stress is whenever you write a method inside of a class, you should be writing some sort of description above the method indicating what it does. So this is a constructor which sets num to 0 and denominator to 1. And then down here you could say this is a constructor which sets num to n and denominator to d. There's more formal commenting, which we'll cover later, but for the ease of use, be sure to comment your code, and that will allow myself as well as your peers to look at your code and reuse it. I hope that helped.